Welcome and thank you for joining our webinar, Construction Trends Impacting the Industry. My name is Kim Anselmo and I'm going to help with webinar logistics this afternoon. So before we get started, I'd just like to take us through a couple of webinar Zoom items. You will notice on your Zoom webinar toolbar, there are three options on how you can engage with our presenters today. You can click on the Q&A box, you can click on the chat, or if you're experiencing any sort of technical difficulties, please do click the one that says raise your hand, and I will get to you as soon as I can to help out. Our presenters are going to hold the questions till the end of the session, but we will get back to you. And if we don't during the live session, we will reach out to you personally as well. If anytime you're experiencing difficulty with your audio, there is a button in the lower left corner where you can click on audio settings and you can click to test your speaker. If you do not hear a tone, do select from the drop-down box and adjust your volume settings as well. So with that, let's get started by introducing our presenters. We have Ryan Prindiville and Scott Stafford, both partners at Armanino, and I'm going to hand it over to them to share a little bit about what they know.
All right. Well, thanks, Kim. Appreciate it. Ryan Prindiville here. I'm a partner in consulting at Armanino and heavily focused on operations and process improvement, working with clients in all of our segments, but spend a lot of time with our real estate and construction business and working with firms of all sizes in our space.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Stafford. I'm an audit partner with the firm out of our Dallas office. And started my career about 24 years ago in a real estate group of a large international firm, and fell in love with real estate right out of the gate, and have enjoyed working in the space ever since, and certainly working with construction contractors. One of the things that I really enjoy here at the firm is I do lead our construction practice group, which we also include our architect and engineering services firms, and look forward to talking to you guys today.
So here's our agenda for the day. We're going to talk about a few different trends and topics that we see as kind of headlines and key things affecting the industry: supply chain, labor shortages and remote workforces, modular building, the role of technology, and then talk a little bit about what you can do. And the reality is, each of these topics are going to hit different firms, different organizations at different sizes, different ways. And so Scott and I are going to go right up the middle. And if anybody's interested in follow-on conversations and understanding more about what you can do for you specifically, or talk about how the trend affects your firm, you're a smaller firm, you're a larger firm, we're happy to have those conversations with you one-to-one after the session or in the coming weeks.
And just a little bit more about our construction industry group here at the firm. Armanino is a full-service accounting firm. We're also have a really comprehensive consulting services group, and so traditional audit and tax services into the industry. We work closely with both banks as well as sureties and bonding agencies within the industry. We have deep percentage of completion expertise that we can bring to bear, again, in both audit and tax. Our consulting group, again, is really comprehensive, very deep in all things IT. One of the things that we're really proud of here at Armanino is we have some proprietary construction software that we've developed for the Dynamics 365 space. We also have a close partnership with Sage as it relates to the Sage Intact products. And all of that is offered through our consulting services. And then also within consulting, we have really an outsourcing group. And that includes everything from day-to-day debit and credit bookkeeping, maintaining the WIP schedule, to a complete back office outsourcing of the human resources component, and really anything that you need back office. We kind of have a back office in a box that is ready to step in and be a force multiplier for you and your company.
Jump right in and talk about what's going on in supply chain.
Yep. So, yeah, this is something that has been a challenge within the industry for a while. The last year and a half has really brought about an unprecedented operating environment as it relates to materials costs, shortages, lead times, et cetera. I really don't know of any construction contractor, regardless of what type of building they do, that is not affected by what's going on. So one of the age-old problems within the construction industry is margin fade, right? So margins look great for the first 90% of the job. You get in that last 10% of completion, and you watch that 25% margin, drop to 12.5%, just cut in half. And today's operating environment with what material costs are doing is just amplifying that age-old problem. And that is increasing the importance of really having best practices in place for managing your job costs, starting with your estimation process, understanding, the lead times that are involved, understanding the cost trends that are there, making sure you're baking those things into your estimate. I've seen companies that are, passing these increasing costs basically straight through in their estimates. I see some companies that are kind of rooting in traditional costs, if you will, and applying a cost surcharge into the estimate. But, I used to work with a contractor that always said the guy that wins the job is a guy that forgets the most, which means you blew it in the estimation process. With what material costs are doing, you just cannot afford to do that anymore. That drop from 25% margin to 12.5 is really going to be a drop from 25% to 5%, maybe even a drop into a loss position on the job. So it's really heightened importance around project planning and estimation. Also, along with that comes increased importance on financial budgeting and reforecasting the budget. Right. When every day you wake up and your cost side of your income statement has changed overnight, it's more important than ever to invest in solid financial budgeting and again, reforecasting. It's real common. You do the budget in the fourth quarter of the year, getting ready for the upcoming year. You get the thing done. Everybody talks about it. Then you put it in the drawer and you don't look at it again. Again, with how dynamic today's cost environment is, you just really can't afford to do that anymore.
Scott's point is proven. I mean, it's not just Scott saying that. It's not just Ryan saying that. All of you are probably feeling it in a lot of ways, but construction research firms like Cumming report, steel has increased to 25 to 50%, recently over this past year, and then lumber costs continue to increase monthly, right? And so that forecast, that budget that was made at the beginning of the year, if it was in many cases, right, it has to be updated on an ongoing basis. And the question is, do you have the tools? Do you have the capability to do that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. The back of the napkin budget definitely is not going to work. I mean, even running the exercise through Excel, which again is really common, you're behind the power curve in terms of best practices, even in that setup. You really need a resource and a tool that allows you to be dynamic in your forecasting. Change your input cost and let it model through in real time, and so you can play out different scenarios and really get to a point where you've got confidence in your budget. Cash flow is king, and you just cannot afford to miss it. So
this may have been pandemic created, but we know it's being exacerbated by kind of the economic forces that are driving growth in almost all of our markets. We're seeing this in markets across the country. This isn't just one specific geo right now too. So this is a countrywide situation right now, exacerbated in certain markets for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, it increases the importance of project planning, making sure you've got the right resources to do that. Again, kind of the back of the napkin project planning doesn't work when lead times on materials are 2 times, 3 times as long as you've ever experienced before. You have got to understand your workflow, project planning, got to make sure that you're prepared for mobilization. The materials are on the ground when the boots get there. We're going to get into a discussion about the labor shortage you definitely cannot afford any downtime on the job site, given where we're at with trade labor right now. So again, just increase importance on making sure you've got the right resources and investing in the right technology, frankly, for project planning, integrating that where you can with your procurement process, again, to help facilitate making sure these materials are getting to the job site when your guys and your crews need them to be there. Kind of a final point on this real quick too is just, you might want to take a look at your contract structure. Fixed cost or fixed pricing is very, very common. But with what's going on with material costs, you might want to start looking at that cost plus model. Again, depending on what type of contractor you are, what you're out there building, there's kind of the norm, the things that are accepted around the way the contracts work. But again, we're seeing unprecedented challenges with material costs. So unprecedented times maybe call for thinking about things a little bit differently, having different conversations with your customers about how to structure those contracts, and taking a look at that cost plus to help protect yourself from this dynamic environment that we find ourselves in.
No doubt. Well, let's jump in and start talking about the next trend, which, like Scott just alluded to, is related, right? It's related in the cost and the planning scenario, but labor shortage and remote workforces. Let's talk a little bit about that. So here's a couple of survey results that we thought were kind of relevant, right? 81% of you report having trouble hiring project managers and supervisors. 52% of you report having difficulties in hiring trade workers. We got difficulty filling laborers, carpenters, crane equipment, heavy operators. This is ubiquitous, and again, this is not just one market. This is in all markets, and the numbers vary, market to market a little bit, but it does, just like Scott mentioned a minute ago, drive. We have to change the way we think about planning. Scott, what do you think that some of our clients can do about this?
Yeah, absolutely. For your typical construction contractor, you've got a mix of employees and you've got a mix of subcontractors that you work with. So you really need to think about both worlds, right? On the employee side, a lot of contractors that I work with, human resources isn't necessarily the first place they look to invest dollars. Right. When you're facing the kind of the labor market that we are, those are smart dollars to invest in those human resources capabilities. Those capabilities allow you to do things like update your comp and benefits study. Truly understand where the market is at. One of the trends that I've seen where I think people can have success in investing in this area is around the benefits. I've seen smaller contractors really kind of stepping up their game around the benefits that they offer. Establishing a 401k plan or upping their game a little bit with the way the matching works around the 401k program. Really kind of elevating a benefits package to be competitive with maybe some of their larger companies in their market. But again, you really need that human resources expertise to execute on that. Again, to really understand it. Things like
that's that reaction from the combination of the talent shortage plus the rebounding economy, right? And it's driving an even more competitive market that we have to plan for.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, the labor shortage. We've been talking about this forever.
For years.
I mean, this is really nothing new. But the last 18 months, again, COVID, the pandemic has again taken this issue to, I think, whole new levels. And again, human resources, really investing in recruiting creatively, finding the talent in the marketplace, having competitive comp and benefit packages so you can retain that talent has never been more important than it is today. Again, one of the things I've seen is sign-on bonuses. Something that larger companies have been able to afford to do, have invested in to help recruit that talent in the door. It may be time to start thinking about that if you haven't already been doing it. Just really, really important, again, to invest in this human resources capability to ensure you can recruit and retain top talent and be competitive in the marketplace. The other side of the coin is working with subcontractors. And there is no quicker way to end a relationship with a subcontractor and to create a reputation in that marketplace that you don't want to have than to have a difficult sub draw process. If your subs are having to fight to get paid, or it's just a painful experience for them to work with your team through that process to get paid, unfortunately, for contractors, they don't have to put up with that anymore. They can walk across the street to the next company and pick up work. There is no shortage of demand for their crews. So, what I would really recommend is take a step back and think about your sub-draw process. Ideally, you want it to be proactive, and I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by that. A lot of times what I see is it's a reactive process, meaning you get to whatever point in the week where you're doing your sub-draw, you go to lunch, you come back from lunch, and you dive into the sub-draw, and you realize, I don't have the agreement signed with this sub. I don't have a proof of insurance out of this sub. I don't have this invoice isn't formatted right. And it's whatever, it's Thursday afternoon, it's Friday afternoon, and now you're fighting all of these reactive battles to try and get everything lined out so you can cut that check or that wire transfer to that sub. And again, it just makes for a painful experience on the sub side of the coin. So, when it comes to the sub draws, really what I talk about is thinking about the who, the what, and the when of that process. So who's doing it? Is it somebody out of your finance team, or, I've seen where the front desk admin, a part of their job every week is to dig into sub draws. Definitely not a best practice. You want to align the right talent to the process. I've seen PMs have to handle it. It's definitely not necessarily the highest and best use of a PM's time. So think about, who do we have doing it? Make sure, again, somebody out of your accounting team, somebody out of your finance team, somebody that understands how these processes should work in the internal controls that need to be there. And then the what of the process. I kind of spoke about this for a minute ago. It's all too often I see it be something of an afterthought of making sure that you've got your sub contract executed. They've delivered their proof of insurance to you, or they've delivered their workers' compensation certification to you, or proof of workers' comp, depending on what state you're in. And then, do you have their invoice? Is the invoice formatted the way you need it to be? Make sure you have those things. This shouldn't just be a Thursday or Friday afternoon process. Make sure you're allowing enough lead time for your people, your team, to evaluate whether or not they have these things in place, so that you don't have that last minute fire drill that ends up being a frustration for your sub. Same with liens. It's one of the best practices I've seen lately. It's increasingly, banks have increasingly asked for some level of a lien release before they will let the developer, your customer, draw on that construction note. So contractors are in the position where they're having to deliver with their billings lien releases, either full, multiple fulls through the process, or at a minimum partials through the process. Well, that means you got to get that lien release out of your sub to really be in a position to be able to deliver that. A best practice that I've seen is obviously have your own lien release, have that form, have it set, fill it out, have it all filled in. Make sure the only thing your sub has got to do is put their signature on the bottom. Right. All that takes time to make sure that's in place. You can't pull all that off in one afternoon, which is
and these are all the things to prep ahead, right, Scott? I mean, these are the things that we're talking about, is don't wait till it's too late. And that last bullet on there is about, how do we make sure that your team is as efficient as possible, knowing that we do have labor shortages and we may have remote workforces, whether your team's whether we're talking about the field team or the players in the office, do they have the right tools, literally and figuratively, in this case, software, a lot of cases, to enable them to be more efficient? If we don't have as many people as we want, in the office or in the field. How do we give them the right platforms to make that happen? And, you know, in our general contractor survey, one of the things that when we hear it all the time, 40% said they're implementing new technology to alleviate the labor shortage, right? And including new tools for project management, field collaboration, estimating, workforce management, bidding. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but you know, all of these trends build on each other, right? None of these are in absence of each other. So as we go through them, you'll see that they all relate to one another. And you might address one, but the other three might still apply.
That's absolutely correct. And you know, one of the things I frequently say is, there's the old expression, having the right tools, 90% of the battle, right? So out on the job site, you wouldn't roll a crew out there without the tools they need to be able to get the job done, right?
Right.
It's the same thing for your office. It's the same thing for your finance team. It's the same thing for, who you have executing in the sub-draw process. All too often, this is an area where companies just have not made yet the investment there to make sure their teams have the right tool. It's the exact same dynamic. You want to give them the right tools, and that's 90% of the battle for them. If you don't give them the right tools, they spend 90% of their time having to work around the fact they don't have the right tool to get the job done. It's really, really important.
Well, let's jump on to our next topic then. So the next one, we kind of called this one modular building, but let's jump to the next slide. And when we kind of, talk about a couple of different things, modular building, green building, things that are affecting the type of work that's being done out in the field, right? And so we hear a lot about this in the news over the last couple of years. Our client base has really started to feel this over the last 18 months. And we're seeing more and more net new companies change the way they're doing business, or new companies come into the market delivering on modular building, developers buying from modular builders and so forth, and growing in the space. That changes the industry, right? In a lot of different ways. And also kind of when we talk about the green building side of it, why do we tie these together? Because they're related in a lot of cases, right? A lot of times the green building is being driven by a modular building trend because of the materials used and so forth. And in the last couple of months, we're seeing more and more trends. And even I just saw an article yesterday, actually, on CNBC, talking about a new community in Southern California being launched with 21,000 homes to go for net zero emissions in total for the community, and talking about ESG trends, environmental sustainability and governance trends, right? And how that's changing the industry as well, and forcing developers and construction entities to think differently, builders to think differently, right? And meet up new standards in order to get projects greenlit or to continue. As if we didn't need one more thing to think about, right? Between our labor shortages, our material shortages, some of these modular trends and the emissions trends may actually help change the way we think about some of those material shortages that we talked about earlier as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a trend I've seen in the construction companies that I work with, establishing some level of a prefabrication shop, or if not just a complete modular construction where you essentially deliver and install a completed unit. Again, depending on, what type of contractor you are and what type of building you're doing, it has different applicability. But one of the things that I would say is, don't dismiss it. And I'll give a really great example. Worked with an electrical contractor for years, and for years the business model was the truck rolls out to the job site and it's got all the conduit on it, it's got all the wire on it, it's got all the switches and plugs, it's got everything that they need, and the electricians on site start grabbing that stuff, measuring out the conduit, putting the bends in it, pulling the wire, and installing it into the structure, doing all of that work on the job site. And then several years ago, probably 6 years ago at this point, this contractor sat back and said, you know what, I can do a lot of this off the job site. And they went out back of their corporate office, they built a prefab shop, they hired a designer, and they got a CAD program. And the bottom line is, what they would do is they could get the schematics for, they get the blueprints of the building, of the property that they were looking to do the work for. This designer gets into the CAD program and literally lays out every inch of conduit, every inch of wire, every bend in the conduit, every plug, switch, relay, everything that is needed for that job, designs it into within this CAD program, and then that fed their estimation process. So they had the benefit of increasing the accuracy, if you will, of that estimate, because they had this thing built in the computer, every inch of it. They knew exactly how much of everything they needed to build the estimate on. Take it to the customer, you show it to them, they say, is this what you're asking for? They say, yep. You execute on the contract, and you got into the prefab shop and literally just assemble, you cut the conduit, you bend it, you pull the wire, you do all of the assembly that you can based on that design right out back of the shop, of the corporate headquarters. Then you put that on the truck, you roll it out to the job site, and it's essentially an assembly task at the job site. Speeds up the efficiency on the job site. So to Ryan's point earlier, it helps with the labor issue, because your crews are on site 30-40% less than they would have been having to build all of this on the site. The other thing that it helps with the labor is, your skilled tradesmen that are pulling, making all the bends, pulling the wire, doing all of these things out in the prefab shop. They got one place they come to work to every day, rather than living out of a suitcase and living out of hotels for months on end. And so it just is a better quality of life. It helps recruit and retain those folks. On the material side, a lot of the materials now are coming to just one location. So it helps with the procurement logistics, just a lot of benefit to it. And I guarantee years ago, if you would have kind of posed the question of, is an electrical contractor, if they ever be able to kind of centralize production, I would have struggled to say yes. I would have struggled to understand how that would work. And so, again, what I would say is just don't be dismissive of it. It's worth some thought. Sit down and think about out of what we do, what we build, are there some things that we can do here in a centralized location to speed up our time on the job site and just be more efficient overall. It is definitely a trend that I see successful contractors leaning into, and it's got profitability benefit, again, labor force benefit, it's a ton of benefit to it.
And I see some controllers, some CFOs, some business owners here in the group of attendees. Why do we tie these together? So Scott's point there, it ties back to the planning topic, right? How do with the labor crunches, material shortages, how do we help you think about things that we can do to plan ahead? This is one of them. And the other one is, we do suspect that, and we see the trend there, like we talked about with ESG and those compliance requirements coming more and more. The more prepared we are as organizations to do some of the things that help us use the right materials at the right time, reduce the waste, be able to measure what we're using and when and why, are going to help us be in compliance with those requirements that developers are going to be asking of us in the coming months and years. Let's jump on to the next topic. Technology. Well, you've heard a little bit of, it's a little bit of a leading indicator here, I suppose. We've heard a little bit in each of the buckets. Then we jump to the next slide. When we talk about technology, we know for a fact that this is one of the things that a lot of firms have maybe not invested as much as they should have over the recent years, and that the adoption has been a little bit slower than other industry sectors. But today we're seeing it pick up, especially in the last 6 months, and the difference even between 2020 and 2021, realizing that we have to pull ahead before the next major issue comes. We're seeing that operating environment accelerate the pace at which firms are investing in technology to help with basic operations, like we talked about: estimation, project management, procurement, time entry, financial reporting, forecasting and reporting. The forecasting and reporting, it sounds silly, but a lot of people we're doing it on the back of the napkin, like Scott said before. It's not acceptable anymore. It's hard to compete given all of these factors we're talking about now.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, technology, we talked about it a second ago. You wouldn't send your crew out to the job site without the tools they need to get the job done. And again, it's the same thing for your management team. It's the same thing for the C-suite. It's the same thing for the controllers. You want to make sure you have the right tools to get the job done, to run your business successfully. The pace of change around technology is just unrelenting, and there's been some massive steps forward in technology platforms. Utilizing visualizations of data, different analytical capabilities around data. Again, every day we have a saying here at Armanino that today is the slowest day of the rest of your life, and that's never more true than with technology. Technology will never be slower than it is today. And again, this is an area where, unfortunately, I do see a lot of construction companies just have not made the investment to date. A lot of people running, QuickBooks for a financial reporting package that does not support job costing at all. I mean, it cannot produce a percentage completion WIP schedule, or using really old legacy platforms. Those things have been lapped by today's technology multiple times over. So one of the things that we talk about with our clients is understanding what's the ecosystem, what's your IT ecosystem as a company. Right. And Ryan touched on some of these things earlier, but if you really think about your process, of finding a new customer, bringing them on board, executing a contract, and then taking them through production, and you think about that linearly, you've got on the front end, you've got a CRM platform opportunity. The old model of, the stack of business cards in the glove box of the F-350 that, you just pop that thing open and flick through there to generate new business. Today's CRM platforms are just making that you are at a competitive disadvantage if that's the way you're operating today compared to the guy down the street that's running a true CRM platform. There's a myriad of estimation products that are out there, depending on what system you're on. Like if you're on a Sage product, they have an estimation platform. Others have their versions of it as well. And then I used to work with a contractor that did spray and foam installation. There was a niche estimation software platform for that specific industry. So there's a lot out there to help bring some automation and help bring a higher level of accuracy to your estimation process. And you've got financial planning and forecasting tools, budgeting tools, project planning, things like Procore that are out there. And then you got your financial reporting system on the back end. Those are all elements of, or potential elements of the IT ecosystem, if you will, that your company needs to live in.
And it doesn't need to be daunting and scary. The reality is you can start simply. You can start by making a few tangible tactical steps forward. You don't have to tackle it all at once. And everybody's starting point is not the same. In fact, in 25 years of doing this or more, maybe, I've never seen two roadmaps that are the same. And the right starting point is different for every firm, right? And based on what you've currently invested in, based on the capabilities of your team, based on your growth program, growth elements, what you're working on as a firm, what you're likely to be tackling as a challenge next, where some of your key business challenges are, and we or firms like us can help you, start with an assessment and get a sense for where are you today, what should you invest in, smart, appropriate, and something that your team can actually adopt and use to make an impact at the right time, right? And that can happen, and build you a roadmap that works for your business.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about this, I think about it really kind of in, there's two primary thoughts that come to mind. One is the ecosystem that we talked about. Mm-hmm. What elements of it does your company need? What level of investment have you made in them or not? The assessment, kind of looking at where are my gaps between where I'm situated today and where that ecosystem ideally needs to be, doing that gap analysis, bringing in expertise to help with it. And the other component that I think about is integration, because, ideally, you want to make sure you have all the elements of that ecosystem that you need this can flat out be a competitive advantage for you.
Right.
You know, if you're not keeping pace, if you're not making the investment, it very quickly can be a disadvantage. But if you are, and you're being proactive in this area, it can absolutely be a competitive advantage. The real best case scenario, beyond just having those puzzle pieces of the ecosystem, is having them all talk to each other, having that integration. And that's where really helping to bring in expertise to help with that is really adds a ton of value. A simple example, can my estimation process talk to my budgeting tool? Can my budgeting tool drive my procurement process? Can it do those things in an automated way? Are there opportunities to do that? You know, a lot of times you'll see people make investments in the pieces of the ecosystem without putting any forethought into, do any of these puzzle pieces fit together? Is that a possibility? And again, that's where having the expertise, you know, outside expertise to come in and help is really valuable. And
that's kind of why we put this topic last too, Scott, right? I mean, the reality is it builds. Is that in these times when you're having material shortages, labor shortages, that tie-in between being able to do your procurement and understanding the lead times and the supply chain impacts on your project plan, and having those not be disconnected processes run by two separate people who may or may not get a chance to talk today because they're so busy, and the understanding what that impact is when from the estimating process to the procurement process to the planning, to the project planning process, to the actual team on the ground who's supposed to be doing the work, making sure that they're not working on outdated information and telling the customer things that you know, in many cases are materially untrue when the procurement and the material shortages are the way they are. They're changing daily.
That's exactly right. It, you know, making sure you've got the technology and the processes in place. It, you know, I see it all the time, where if you don't have best practices in place here, your crew's out at the job site, and, you know, I'll use a crude example. They need 10 of something and they have 7 because our procurement process didn't quite get there. Our left hand didn't talk to our right hand. You know, and it can be an honest mistake. We could just have honestly, you know, missed it on an estimate, but a lot of times it's that left hand not talking to the right hand through the process. So there your crew is on the job site and they're 3 short of what they need to get the thing done. What do? They jump in the truck and they run down to Home Depot, they run down to Lowe's, they run down to the nearest, you know, material supplier, and it's give me three right now. I guarantee you're not getting a good price on those 3 that they're getting right there. You know, and your finance team, your accounting team's probably getting the phone call of, hey, my credit card is maxed. I need these 3 doors and I can't, you know, I'm maxed because your 4 other crews have been doing the same thing all day and everybody's putting it on the company card. So again, that's just a crude example though, but it's a real life example. That happens every single day. And this is where investments in these type of things can help eliminate that happening or help to smooth those bumps out. For sure.
And Scott, you just said something important. We always hear this from clients and people we're working with, right? Oh, but that seems like a big expense to do up front right now, and I don't know what it is. But 9 out of 10 times when we do the analysis and we sit down and look at it, right? Those overruns, those project overruns, the cost overruns, the procurement overruns, the unplanned expenses. If we could have avoided even 25% of them, 90% of they avoid that upfront cost, or they actually make up for that upfront cost right there at the beginning of the year.
Absolutely. So again, it all boils down to making sure your team has got the right tools on the job site, off the job site. And again, it's an area where it's not unusual to just see it's an under-invested resource. It's just, you're not where you need to be. And you know, one of the things, I'm an audit partner again. So one of the things when we get out and we could do an audit and I get my audit team together and we're getting ready to go do field work, one of the things I'll tell them is keep an eye out for anything outside the system. Keep an eye out for any manual process that they're doing. So and for like every single contractor that I work with that are on QuickBooks, guaranteed 100%, the WIP schedule is manual. It's over in Excel. It's because QuickBooks just can't, it doesn't support it. So it's, as you think about your IT ecosystem, as you think about what's integrated, what's not integrated, that's a great place to kind of just start thinking about where's my team working outside the system? If they're working outside the system, it's either a training opportunity that needs to be backfilled, or it's I don't have the right tools in their hands, and so they're having to do a workaround. And it's just a red flag moment for me as an auditor. It's a red flag moment of if they're doing something manually, we probably want to lean into that because that's where you can make mistakes. You know, as a business operator, it's a red flag of where your team is not resourced the way they need to be. So again, that's just if you sit back and think about your team and you recognize any of this in them, if you know they're working outside the system, then you most likely have got a need that you need to sit back and think about.
And if you're worried about kind of that, you know, ROI, that investment analysis, reach out for help, right? That you know, we talk about what can we do, you know, whether it's Armanino, there are other players who can do it too. Reach out for help and ask for help in building an ROI model and showing that it makes sense to spend a little money to do these things and what it's going to impact and how the rest of the year is going to look. Let's jump onto the next slide. So here's a good wrap up. You know, what can you do and how and why do we take action? Well, in each of those 4 buckets, Scott and I talked about, you know, assess yourself against those 4 trends. You know, where do you stand? What's working? What's not? Which ones apply to you? How do you address them? Do you have a plan? Have you been intentional about making decisions about how you're going to handle those things? Or is life happening to you? Is it accidental, right? We talk a lot about this when we advise clients. Make an intentional decision on each of those trends, discuss it with the leadership team, and have an action plan, right? And if you don't have if you haven't gotten there yet, like Scott said, do a gap assessment. Understand what each of those trends and understand where you stand. What's happening there. Put together, and then based on that, put together a roadmap. You know, what are the steps you're going to improve? And remember, you don't have to bite it all off at the same time. Make a plan over time. What are you going to do this quarter, next quarter, by the end of the year? What's happening in 2022? Know the plan and socialize it. Get the team engaged and know it. If you're the controller, the CFO on the line, I see a few of you and I see a couple of business owners too. It's not just you. You can't do it alone. Get the whole team aligned.
That's exactly right. You know, understand your plan. Make sure it's a deliberate plan. Make sure it's a proactive plan. It is, you know, again, it's a crazy operating environment out there. In some of these areas we've talked about, it's unprecedented. And so it's really, really putting a lot of people into that reactive position. You're just having to deal with putting out fires every single day. There's no way you're maximizing the value of your company operating like that. So again, think about the tools that are in your team's hands. Do you have the right tools? Do they have the right toolkit? And if they don't, you know, that's an area where you can make improvements for sure. You know, none of this is easy. You know, having a successful construction company is not easy. You know, there's so many that come and go. You know, for you that are on the phone that have joined us today, you know, you've been successful. Congratulations. You're the minority of everybody out there that tries to start a construction company and have it be successful. The vast majority of them fail. So congratulations on being successful. And there's a model that helped you get there, you know, business at the tailgate, if you will, you know, the business card stack that's in the glove box of the F-350 that got you there. That's great. The world is evolving. The world is transforming. The operating environment you're in, again, is unprecedented. And you've come this far. You know, take a look at where you're at, do these gap assessments, make sure you're investing in your team. And again, putting the right tools in their hands so you can continue to be successful, continue to be competitive, create competitive advantages through these things, and not only, again, stay profitable, but to grow and to take your companies into the next phase of their business life.
I'm seeing a question that came in here, Scott. It says, how do I do an assessment? Do I have to do it alone? Are there templates? And the answer is, no, none of you have to do it alone, right? You're welcome to ask Scott and myself. Reach out to the firm anytime for help. There are definitely other firms out there that can help you as well. There's a lot of places out there. I would say, and yes, there are templates. There are the trends that we talk about here are based on things that we see across many firms with the clients that we work with and across the industry. And there are common types of questions we look at, whether it's, looking at the team, look at the processes, look at how you're operating, look at the tools, look at how you've already adapted. And so there are templates for that as well that we're happy to talk about with anybody, if anybody has follow-up questions on those.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked a lot today about technology helping to address some of these challenges, but it goes beyond that as well. I mean, there's a lot of best practices that we see in working with clients. How your operations team engages with your finance team, what that process looks like. Just there's a myriad of things. And you don't have to go it alone. We're happy to talk to you, and as Ryan said, there are others out there as well. The ROI is real. Just understand where you need to make the investment, and if you don't have clarity on that, reach out. We're happy to come in and help.
Great. Well, Scott and Ryan, thank you so much for everything you've shared. I do want to let everybody know that's on our webinar today that we will be holding another webinar next month in this series that talks about how to reduce the cost of risk for every job you're working on. That'll be on July 27th as well. And I did see one more question that came through. It was around asking, their company's a little resistant to change. Do you have any suggestions on how to get some buy-in from your leadership? I think you guys have touched on it a little bit, but if maybe wrapping up on how to go ahead and adopt that new change that you're talking about here.
Yeah, Ryan,
you want to touch it, Scott? I can jump in, and we didn't prep for that one. That's a really good one, and it's super common, right? And it's not just construction companies; it's all types of companies. I kind of alluded to one of the methods, right? One of them is an ROI analysis, right? And sometimes people are scared because they don't understand the cost, and a cost up front that's different than what we have done for years feels scary, right? And so sometimes understanding, how to build a model that shows what the spending some money on something different can save or can do over time, and how material it can be to the ownership group, to the principals, to the leadership team, right? Whether that's a savings in time and effort, whether it's a savings and actual cost savings, material savings, whether it's a labor savings, and there's both hard savings and then soft savings. Potentially even recruiting and retention can be affected, and we have models that we've shown how those can happen as well. Those are all big factors in getting people to buy in, right? And the second part of it is communicating those impacts. Sometimes people really just don't understand the pain that's being felt by different players in an organization. Sometimes just documenting that and sharing that with the team really helps as well.
Yeah, I think those are all spot on, Ryan. And, kind of on that last point, one of the first thoughts that come to my mind is, it goes back to what we started with, which is margin fade. Right. And so many companies struggle with it. And, if you can sit back and quantify that, right? So, I use the example of we're a 25% margin job for the first 90% of completion, and then we finish at a 12.5% job, quantify that. What is, was that $100,000 of bottom line profit? That potentially there to either grow reinvest into the business to grow, or, to help get the next Ranger bass boat that the owner wants. you start putting it into those terms, into real dollars, and then take that back to the root cause. Look, we're experiencing this margin fade. It cost us $100 grand on this job, and here's what happened. I'm having to put together this WIP schedule in Excel, and I'm having to chase the PMs 7 days out of the week to get the estimated cost to complete to update. And when I get it, I can tell they're only putting a half effort into this. Here are some things that we can invest in to help get at these root causes, to help correct these issues. Money usually talks. So that'd be one suggestion I would throw out. Like I said, if it's, hey, look, what happened on this job is the difference between you and that new bass boat, or it's the difference between you and that dove trip down to Argentina, or, whatever it is you want to do. You start making it real for people. That can get people to put their elbows on the table and lean in.
And I think that change management strategy, in all fairness, it changes whether, if you're a family-owned enterprise, that answer might be different than if you're an investor-owned enterprise. If you're shareholder backed, the different types of entities might change the answer a little bit. But to Scott's point, ROI, and the money in your pocket usually works to some extent. How we approach it, how we communicate that might change based on the type of entity you are as well.
Sure.
Well, thank you both very much. I want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon, as well as Scott and Ryan mentioned. If you have any follow-up questions, do directly reach out to them. You will receive this PowerPoint and a recording after the webinar, expected in the next 72 hours. And we just want to say thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.